The sun burned low over the red desert, painting the sky with gold and dust. The rancher, Elias Ward, stood by his lonely corral, fixing a broken gate. He was 30, tall, broad-shouldered, but quiet as the wind through the canyon. Folks in town called him the Virgin Rancher. Not because he was weak, but because no woman ever stayed long enough to break the silence he lived in. He spent his days tending cattle and his nights staring at the empty chair across his fire. Until that one evening, when thunder rolled in without clouds. It wasn't thunder, it was her, a towering Apache girl, nearly 6 feet of muscle, sunburnt skin, and long black hair that caught the light like fire, rode up on a bareback horse. Her eyes were amber, sharp as a hawk's, and she carried a rifle like it was part of her arm. She dismounted, boots sinking into the dust, and stared right at Elias. "You live here alone?" she asked. He nodded, unsure if he should reach for his gun or his words. The girl dropped her rifle on the ground, looked him dead in the eye, and said with a smirk, "Greater than, I'm starving for a man." Elias froze. No woman had ever said something like that to him in his life. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I ain't sure what you mean." She took a step closer, her shadow falling over him like a mountain. "I've been running 3 days. No food, no sleep. I found your smoke. Thought maybe you had both, food and a man brave enough to feed me." Her stomach growled loudly, breaking the tension. Elias exhaled, half relieved. He led her inside, gave her beans, cornbread, and water. She ate like she hadn't seen a meal in months. Then she looked around his cabin, the walls, the tools, the simple bed, and said quietly, "You built all this alone?" "Since my pa died," he said. "Ain't much, but it's home." She nodded, her face softening for the first time. "In my tribe, a man builds like that, women bring him a feast. But your people, they let you starve alone." That night, rain began to fall. The Apache girl sat by the fire while Elias mended a saddle strap. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nyara," she said. "Means, fire that doesn't die." "Fitting," he said. "You walked in here like a storm." She laughed, a deep, bold laugh that filled the cabin. "Maybe that's what you needed." Elias didn't answer, but the truth hung heavy in the room. Maybe she was right. Days passed. She stayed, helping him herd cattle, mend fences, and cook. She was stronger than most men he knew, and wilder than the desert itself. But every night she'd sit by the fire and hum songs from her tribe, songs that made him dream of places he'd never seen. One evening, after fixing a broken well, Elias looked at her and said, "Why'd you really come here, Nyara?" She looked at the horizon, her face unreadable. "The army burned my village. My brothers are gone. I had nowhere else to ride." Silence filled the air. Then she turned toward him. "You ever lose everything, rancher?" He nodded. "Lost my folks to fever. Lost my neighbors to greed. Guess I know that emptiness." She stepped closer, her voice low. "Then we ain't so different." That night, they sat shoulder to shoulder under the stars. She reached out, took his hand, and said, "Greater than, you don't need to be afraid of a woman's hunger. Sometimes it's not for food, but for life." He met her eyes, his heart pounding like the hooves of 100 horses. And when the first light of dawn broke over the hills, the Virgin Rancher wasn't lonely anymore. Months passed. The town started whispering about the wild Apache woman who tamed the quiet rancher. But Elias just smiled, because while the world saw her as a savage, he saw the truth. She wasn't starving for a man. She was starving for peace. And somehow, out there on that lonely stretch of desert, they both found it, in each other. The morning sun crept over the mesa, golden light spilling across the plains. Elias woke to the smell of smoke and biscuits. Nyara was outside, cooking over an open fire, her long hair loose in the wind. He stood quietly at the doorway, watching her. The way she moved, strong, deliberate, wasn't like the women from town. She didn't giggle or pretend weakness. She belonged to the earth itself. She turned and caught him staring. "You're up late, rancher," she teased. He smiled faintly. "Didn't sleep much." She nodded knowingly. "Your bed's too empty." He coughed, pretending to check his saddle. "Just ain't used to company." Nyara grinned. "Then get used to it. I'm not leaving yet." Days turned to weeks. They worked side by side under the blazing sun. She roped wild horses like she was born in the saddle. He showed her how to mend wire and read the clouds before a storm. At night, they sat by the fire. Elias listened to her stories, of buffalo hunts, of her father's bravery, of the night the soldiers came. Her voice trembled when she spoke of her family. They took everything, Elias. But not my fire. Never that. He stared into the flames. I lost everything too. Thought maybe if I stayed quiet, the world would leave me be. But the world don't care if you're quiet, it just keeps taking. Nyara looked at him, eyes glistening. Then stop letting it take. The bandits come. One hot afternoon, as Elias was bringing water from the well, dust clouds rose on the horizon. Horses, 5 of them, riding fast. Bandits. They were the same men who had been stealing cattle across the valley. Elias grabbed his rifle. Nyara was already behind the barn, knife in hand, crouched low like a mountain cat. The men rode in, laughing. Their leader spat on the ground. Heard there's a savage woman living here. Thought we'd see what kind of company you keep, rancher. Elias raised his gun. Ain't nothing here for you. The leader smirked. We'll see. Before Elias could fire, one of the men lunged forward. A shot rang out, loud, echoing across the plain. The man fell off his horse. Elias blinked. Nyara stood behind him, smoke curling from her rifle. She stepped forward, her voice fierce. You want trouble? Come take it. The others hesitated. They weren't used to seeing a woman, let alone an Apache, stand that tall and fearless. The leader glared, spat again, and turned his horse. You two ain't worth dying for. But we'll be back. They rode off in a trail of dust. Elias turned to Nyara. You didn't have to shoot. She wiped her rifle clean. You didn't have to thank me either. He smiled despite the tension. You're something else, Nyara. She looked him dead in the eye. So are you, Elias. Most men fear me. You don't. I'd be a fool to fear the only person who's ever saved me. The fire within. That night, the air was heavy and silent. The kind of silence that comes before something changes forever. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then wild. Thunder cracked above the hills. Nyara stood at the doorway, her hair wet, her eyes glowing in the lightning. Elias approached her slowly. You ever think about leaving? He asked. She shook her head. I've been running all my life. Maybe I was meant to stop here. He stepped closer, the rain now drenching them both. Nyara, he began, but words failed him. She reached out and touched his face. You don't need to talk, rancher. Just feel. And under that storm, 2 lost souls found something neither had ever known. Not hunger, not fear, but belonging. The morning after, when the sun rose again, the ranch looked the same. But everything between them had changed. Elias brewed coffee, nervous as a boy. Nyara sat on the porch, humming an Apache lullaby. He handed her a cup. You planning to stay long? She smiled softly. Depends. You still need me. He looked at her, really looked, and said, I reckon I always will. She laughed. Then I'll stay. Epilogue. The Legend of the Virgin Rancher. Years later, travelers would ride past the Ward Ranch and whisper about the man and woman who built it together. They'd see a tall Apache woman teaching children how to ride. They'd see a quiet rancher smiling for the first time in years. And when someone asked, who is she? Elias would simply say, she's the fire that doesn't die. Because out in the Wild West, where loneliness eats men alive, one starving heart found another. And the desert finally bloomed.